Collapse file number 6. Subject: Bre-X minerals and a patch of jungle in Borneo called Busang. The promise: the richest gold strike in human history, some 70 million ounces with talk of 200 million more. Peak value of the company, around $6 billion. The gold actually in the ground, not one economic ounce. Cause of death: a mine salted by hand, sample by sample, with gold panned from the very rivers that ran past it. This is the collapse files. In 1993, David Walsh was not a man you would lend money to. A Calgary stock promoter with a string of failed ventures behind him, he and his wife had just declared personal bankruptcy, some $200,000 in debt. He ran what was left of his company from the basement of his home. He was not a geologist. He had never found anything. He named the company after his two sons, Brett and Sean, Bre-X. His last gamble was a long-shot gold property on the island of Borneo, deep in the Indonesian jungle, bought for a pittance. To work it, Walsh leaned on two geologists. One was John Felderhoff, a Dutch-Canadian with a real pedigree. He had helped find a giant copper and gold deposit in Papua New Guinea. The other was a charming Filipino field geologist named Michael de Guzman. And in December of that year, with the drilling license about to lapse, de Guzman told Walsh he knew exactly where to drill. The spot, he said, had come to him in a dream. The dream delivered. The drill cores that came back from Busang were studded with gold, and not a little. As hole after hole was tested, the numbers climbed in a way that made hardened mining men dizzy. 2 million ounces, then 30 million. At the 1996 annual meeting, Felderhoff gave the figure that became legend. "I think it's 30 million, plus," he said, plus. Bay Street and Wall Street fell in love. A stock that had traded for pennies on a sleepy Calgary exchange became one of the most valuable companies in Canada. After a 10-for-1 split, the shares, adjusted, peaked near $286. On paper, the company was worth around $6 billion. The analysts at Lehman Brothers called Busang the gold discovery of the century. And ordinary people poured in. In one small Alberta town, St. Paul, it was said 200 residents had been made rich on Bre-X. Canadians remortgaged their homes to buy shares. The country's most respected pension funds bought in too: the Ontario Teachers' Plan, the Quebec Pension Fund, the Municipal Employees Fund, tens of millions of dollars each, invested on behalf of school teachers and city workers who had never heard of Busang. But here is the reversal at the heart of this file. The gold was real. You could hold it, weigh it, test it. What was not real was where it came from, because the gold in those drill cores had not been pulled up out of the earth at Busang. It had been carried in by hand and stirred into the crushed rock before it ever reached a lab. Michael de Guzman, investigators later concluded, was salting the samples. He began, it is said, by shaving gold from his own wedding ring. Then he scaled up, buying an estimated $60,000 of gold panned from local rivers and blending it into the core in careful, believable amounts, so nothing ever looked too rich. Think about what that means. A real town had grown up around the site, with a church, a school, generators, real workers, and real drill rigs. The world believed gold was being pulled out of the ground there. In truth, gold was being carried up the river and poured in. The richest mine on earth was a story, told one sample at a time. Why did no one catch it? Because the most basic safeguards were missing. Bre-X did not split its cores, the standard practice of sawing each sample in half, testing one, and locking the other away so an outsider could check it. The whole core was crushed, destroying the evidence. The samples were tested at a lab deep in Indonesia, far from prying eyes, and no independent driller was ever allowed to sink a hole beside theirs to confirm the find. By now, the prize was too big to stay quiet. This was Suharto's Indonesia, and the president's family and friends moved to claim their share. The mining license became a bargaining chip. Suharto's daughter backed one foreign suitor. His son was brought in on the other side. His golf partner brokered the final deal. After a bruising fight, the giant American miner Freeport McMoran was brought in to part-own the mine, to run it, and fatally, to look closely at the rock. For 3 years, the fraud had survived on distance and trust. Now, a serious mining company was about to put a drill into Busang itself. That was the one thing the lie could not survive. In early 1997, Freeport's geologists did the simplest, deadliest thing. They drilled their own holes, twins, just a meter or two from Bre-X's richest strikes. If the gold was real, it would be there too. They pulled up barren rock, almost nothing. They drilled again, nothing. The most valuable gold deposit on Earth was, in their cores, ordinary stone. There was one man who could explain the gap between Bre-X's gold and Freeport's empty rock, Michael de Guzman. In March of 1997, he was summoned back to Busang to face the due diligence team. He boarded a helicopter for the site. About 20 minutes into the flight, over dense jungle, he went out of the open door, a fall of some 800 feet. 4 days later, a search party found a body in the swampy forest below, badly decomposed and partly consumed by the jungle. Beside it, investigators reported hastily written suicide notes. The death was ruled a suicide. The body was cremated within days, no dental records, no DNA test. But de Guzman was a man of secrets. By some accounts, as many as 5 women each believed they were married to him, scattered across different cities, none aware of the others. The body was difficult to identify, and to this day, some insist he was murdered to keep him silent, or that he never died at all, and slipped away with the secret of Busang. We do not truly know who went out that helicopter door. And then the science delivered the exhibit. When experts put the gold from Bre-X's samples under a microscope, it told on itself. The grains were rounded and worn smooth, the shape of gold that has tumbled down a river for miles. Real gold from a hard rock deposit like Busang is sharp, angular, freshly broken. Worse, the silver had been leached from the surface of the grains, exactly as river water does it. The metallurgy was conclusive. This gold had come from a streambed, not from the drill core. One engineer, it later emerged, had quietly flagged the strange, river-worn gold a full year before. Bre-X cornered, hired an independent firm, Strathcona Mineral Services, to settle the question. Their report landed in May of 1997, and its verdict is still read in mining schools today. The tampering, they wrote, was on a scale, and over a period of time, and with a precision that, to their knowledge, was without precedent in the history of mining anywhere in the world. Some 16,400 samples had been falsified. The conclusion was total. There was no economic gold at Busang. For investors, the unraveling was brutal and fast. As word spread that the gold was a phantom, everyone ran for the exit at once. The selling was so heavy, the Toronto Stock Exchange's computers buckled under the volume. Bre-X fell from around $6 billion to almost nothing in a matter of days, down to a few cents a share. Some shareholders kept the worthless certificates as souvenirs of the largest gold fraud in history. Roughly 40,000 investors were wiped out. The Ontario Teachers' Plan lost about $100 million. The Quebec Pension Fund, around $70 million. The Municipal Employees Fund, some $45 million. School teachers and pensioners across Canada had, without ever knowing it, staked their futures on a salt shaker of gold in the Borneo jungle. And the men at the top, David Walsh, the bankrupt promoter turned paper billionaire, had already moved to a mansion in the Bahamas. There, intruders reportedly broke in and threatened his life for his money. He never saw a courtroom. In June of 1998, just over a year after the collapse, he died of a brain aneurysm. He was 52. John Felderhoff, the geologist who had sold the world on 30 million ounces, plus, and who had quietly sold $84 million of his own stock before the fall, was the only human being ever charged. Canada's regulators pursued him for years. In 2007, he was acquitted on every count. The court could not prove he had known. For the largest mining fraud in history, the number of people convicted was 0. No one ever answered for salting Busang. The likely mastermind was Ash. The founder was dead. And the richest gold mine on Earth turned out to have been seeded with perhaps $40,000 of gold, bought from the rivers of Borneo and carried up to the camp by hand. From that humiliation, Canada built a monument, a new rulebook, the standard now known as 43-101, forcing every mining company to prove its gold through an independent, qualified expert, with the samples handled and tested under strict, traceable rules. Every gold strike announced since then stands, in part, on the grave of Busang. $6 billion, 70 million ounces promised, not one of them real. a company named for two little boys, a geologist who drilled where his dreams told him to, and a man who went out a helicopter door with the answer. The gold was always there, it simply came from the river, not the rock. File number 6 is closed.